Hello and welcome to Catholic Homeschool Week. And I am so happy that you are here to join us today. And especially, I am so happy that I am being joined by dear Jen Mackintosh. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on this celebration week, Jen. How are you? How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I am, like almost everybody else in homeschool land, starting to, we put away stuff from the last year. We started to think about what worked and what didn't and how we want to plan for the next year. So I'm sort of I'm in that same boat. I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, I'm planning, and I'm hopeful in all of the potential, fresh potential in a new year.
I knew it would be kind of fun for us to just have this conversation now. And I'm thinking, yeah, it came really at the perfect time because July, when we do this, and for those who see the recording, it is a time of pondering and reflecting. And you and I have been through many seasons of homeschooling and what that looks like. And maybe we could just talk a little bit about that process. But I think I really would love for us to steer the conversation in terms of in that planning and pondering. One of the things that you have incorporated, I know you always say nobody owns it and it's just wasn't invented, but you really spearheaded a revival towards morning baskets. And how do how do we actually stop, see what worked, and then start to move that forward? Do you have like some magic button for that?
I wish.
Yeah.
No, I do think that a lot of it has to do with the ability for mom to gain some perspective, which is hard for us. I mean, it's just hard because we're in the trenches with a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 17-year-old, or whatever the stretch of kids is, and the dynamic of kids that you have in the home is. And that gets to be very, very hard because we can be really myopic. And sometimes that's necessary because we're doing an algebra lesson, we're teaching someone to read, we're changing a diaper, we're prepping for dinner, all these things. And so I think that if there's a secret or a magic button, it is simply in widening your scope, your big picture view of everything, and reminding yourself as you kind of step back and refresh that perspective, that big picture view, that really it's ultimately all about relationships. It's really about relationships. And Paolo and I were kind of hinting about this before we started recording about some of those unanticipated fruits of homeschooling that I see now that I have adult kids that have graduated and like beyond graduated. They've gone on, they've graduated from college, they have their own families. And I see that the fruit really was in the relationships that we developed. The relationships between books and ideas, the relationships between me and the child, and how those grew over the years. They remember those, they see the fruits of those way more than they remember a given book, although they do remember some of their books.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I'm up here in my attic, which is surrounded by books, a lot less because I started boxing them up in the sense of saving them for specific children. So what we did was for one thing I did was I actually, there's some really cool apps out there where you can just scan the barcodes.
Yes.
Now, I have a lot of old library books, so there are barcodes. So my daughters had helped me one summer, probably about 2 years ago, just to inventory. So I have these ginormous lists of all the treasures that we had. But it was like as if we were going down a family reunion as we're pulling the books off the shelf and like, oh, I remember that story. And don't you remember? And just how much they meant to each other and to the bond we have with each other. So now, one of the things we were talking about, that all stems from, first of all, I want to say relationships. You recently, I heard you speak about that, and that you really brought back to my heart. And oh my gosh, Jen, thank you for that reminder, because when, everything, the dust settles and you've done this homeschool thing and I've launched all my children, that's the only thing that matters is their relationship with God and our relationship with each other.
Yep.
Yeah. That is what's going to be really, I feel like when we approach, the golden gates, It isn't going to be, did you do that geography lesson and you really shirked your duties on teaching them the multiplication table the correct way? It's really about the relationship. So you started to hint about, how does that play out in your family? Like, give us a for example with the big.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one example is with a particular book. So let's bring in some books here. The Sign of the Beaver.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a book I have all my fifth graders read. We're studying American history, and they read. It's a beautiful, extraordinary piece of historical fiction, and a fun piece of historical fiction. And my kids still talk about it to this day. It's a memorable book, but in particular, it always seems to be read in the summer months.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this pool, and so we'd get in the pool. And every year I would, go to the dollar store, would not spend a lot of money. I'd go to the dollar store and get, whatever, the inflatable alligator or the dolphin or whatever. And we would call it the narration floaty. And the kids would read, whoever happened to be reading Sign of the Beaver at that time would read the book and then save their narration till we get out of the pool, and they could narrate Sign of the Beaver to me. And that is kind of tucked in my heart, favorite memory, but the kids remember that as well. And so part of this is, you're incorporating this in your family time. You're engaging with story. So you're engaging with narrative. The kids are bringing their mind, their intellect to this. They're recalling and telling back, which, by the way, is an extremely difficult skill for them to develop and to grow and habit. And then we're connecting to you're in the pool, they're on the narration floaty, they're on the floating alligator, and we're talking together about these really neat stories and these ideas and these moments of American history. And so, that's my 22-year-old that just graduated with an electrical engineering degree on full academic scholarship. I'm so proud of, who shares those memories of the Sign of the Beaver and the narration floaty. So those are the kind of relationships that, they're in the little parts. And so, like Paula was saying, we are not going to remember, moms, you are not going to care if your third grader was following the scope and sequence for your average third grader, and what they should be doing. You're not going to care about that. What you're going to look back on are the times that you stopped and slowed and made space for relationship. And sometimes that means removing things from the schedule so that there is an opportunity to dig deeper, to connect more on some of those really rich materials.
Yeah. And what easier way, like, as you said, that this whole idea of taking a book, the seeds of something like that, to start having the conversation, the opportunity to use that for some practical skills. So it's just so funny. You said it this morning. We have a group text with all the children, and my son sent us a picture of a snapper turtle that's maybe about 2 feet. He's, look what we found in my yard this year. And right away, everybody's chiming in because they all remember the year that this teeny weeny little snapper turtle wandered its way in the garden. And one of the kids picked it up and said, "What's this?" And we pull out all the nature books. And originally they named it Woody, but then we're like, it's a snapper. And we can't when it's really big. And it was just, but to see that now he's married, has a little almost 2-year-old, and he's passing on that same love of, let's just have a conversation or relate to an experience around nature and around natural history, exploring it together. It was just brought that back home, the years. Good old Woody the turtle, which was pretty funny. They're like, no snapper turtles around little children.
No. But how fun to have those, to have the memories with the kids, because this doesn't last forever. The kids do eventually grow up and they have their own lives, and our job is not to check every box and teach them cram every possible thing into their noggins in a period of 12 years. That is such a fallacy that I think that if we could take that weight off of our shoulders as educators, I think we would find so much more freedom to engage those beautiful moments, those rich moments with the kids. If we could stop adding that burden to our shoulders. So it's not to fill them with everything. It is to engage, form relationships, and give them the tools to be lifelong educators so that they can call you when they have their own kids and say, look what we found, remember the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it really, I mean, one of the things we're talking about here is just a legacy for a spirit of lifelong learning. Wouldn't you say that's kind of more important? What you're infusing is like how to go about just being curious about the world around us, because it screams of the creator, you know?
Absolutely. Well, Aristotle says all wisdom begins in wonder. And that is a very Catholic thought. If you dig into Catholic thinkers, you find that reflected everywhere. And if you look at biblically, you know, our Lord even says, a child, let the children come to me. If you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to be like a child. Well, think of a child. They are not tainted with all these ideas of what should be or what I should look like or any. They're extremely earnest. They're so sincere. They're absolutely this sort of earnestness and this curiosity to know. And that's what we have to continue to model. You can't teach that, moms and dads. You cannot teach it. You have to model it, which means you yourself see the ladybug first. And what is that? And what's he doing here? And why is he red? You ask the questions and you're not afraid of the questions that you can't answer right away. You don't have to have all of this encyclopedic knowledge here. You just have to be willing to ask questions, to exhibit wonder, and your kids will follow right along. And there you have just laid the foundation of education.
So, you know, one of the things, and I think most homeschoolers now really come from that academic brick and mortar kind of experience. And I would venture to say that a lot of the curriculum out there, yes, even though I know your mom homeschooled your siblings,
right? That's
so
right.
You saw the benefits of that from your siblings. But like, it's that guilt, you know, we feel guilty for doing the things that are the most important. Like, you know, how can we kind of shake that? And I'm hoping that it's really the opportunity of like us gathering together for this celebration week, but also within the community, because I think the world what we're doing is radically different than what the world is doing. And I mean, you kid yourself not, it's getting harder and harder. And I know that families have always been kind of under attack for different reasons, but it really is at the very core right now to destroy families and to destroy something that's so beautifully natural, as you said, awe, wonder, spending time together. You know, how would you say, even just for yourself, has that played out for you yourself? Do you ever feel like that's a struggle to say, you know, I got to check off the boxes? Like, at what point did you say it was okay not to?
Some of it is experience. Some of it, I mean, it takes time to do things. It takes anything worth doing is going to take an investment of time. And some of it was my ability to look at those that were further down the road than I was and see the fruits in their children, knowing that I couldn't emulate that. They have a very unique family situation. And so I wasn't trying to imitate that, but it is valuable. It is extremely valuable to come alongside, to observe those that are further down the road than you. Because in the beginning, if you've got, you know, everybody is 8 years old and under, it's very hard to step out in faith and trust that you don't have to check all the boxes, and it will drive you right to the brink if you do.
Yeah. And I would say also the other part is that it's not even just and well-meaning people that love you very much may not be appreciative of your decision.
Yeah. And so that plays into, you have to trust. Both of you, your husband, the husband and the wife have got to talk together, and you're going to have to build a little hedge around that relationship and that decision. If you've decided this is what we're doing, this is what God is calling to us to do right now, this is how we can nurture these souls right now. It's in our home. We each have the responsibility to educate our children, whether our kids are in Catholic school, private school, public school, or homeschool. Every single one of us has the responsibility to educate our children, whether we delegate it or not. So we have this responsibility. If we choose not to delegate it and to educate them at home, how are we going to do that? Well, if we're going to do it together, then it may mean that we have to endure hearing well-meaning advice from others, and we can say, well, thanks so much for that.
Right.
And moving on, and moving on.
Yeah.
And moving on.
Absolutely. And just appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. But I did, to your question, there's no doubt about it. I'm very human, and I struggle as well with, I got a senior this year. We've got to do this. We're behind on this. I don't have this done. It is at times really, really hard to trust where we are, to trust that always the season God is giving you is the lesson. That is the lesson. And sometimes that season is radically difficult. What if you are struggling with a chronic illness that plays into your energy level and the fatigue? This season is the lesson. You do what you can, and you plan accordingly. So of course, everybody struggles with the check the box mentality at times. I will say that we kind of talked a little bit about morning basket, or we hinted at morning basket of the idea. And if we want to, we could just call it a reading basket. Yes. If that trips you up and thinking you have to do it in the morning, because you most certainly do not. And I haven't over the years, every single year. But a common reading basket. And the idea of it was simply that I discovered as my kids were getting older that I was missing the opportunity to engage all of them together as I had kids that were getting older and doing more independent work. And I didn't want to let that go. And at first I thought, well, this is a selfish reason to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. But now as I sit back with 22 years of experience under my belt, I see that it, I don't know, maybe it was motivated somewhat selfishly, but I think it was actually rooted in this universal idea of engaging and building relationships and sharing together. And now, after all these years, I see this extraordinary fruit of my kids having all come together. And at one point, all 5 of them, we had a senior down to a toddler, all in the same room together, reading or listening to me read aloud, and narrating and telling me back. Yes. And it really is as simple as that. I mean, we are fantastic at overcomplicating things, right?
Oh my gosh! So we call it.
I'm going the queen of it.
Yeah, I was going through a course myself recently on just because on how to manage the community and this tech kind of stuff, and the person teaching talks about what's called the knowledge trap, but also the complexity trap. So the knowledge trap is this whole idea that, oh, I'm not qualified to teach my kids. How could I even possibly take this on? But this idea of complexity, that we tend to overcomplicate things, that might be some of our perfectionism, if that's part of our DNA,
Yep, absolutely.
Like, not perfect. I'm not going to get started, or look perfect. But I think I'd like to dig a little into the morning basket, because I think what you touched upon are a couple of really important points. And one was you trusted your mother's heart, Jen. It just came from this point of it's okay. Like we have this negative connotation of selfishness, but it wasn't to give Jen the glory. You really are rooted in giving God the glory. And so God's loaned you these children for just this short amount of time. So be a little selfish with your children while you have them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's, I think it's a good way of looking at it, and trusting your own instinct. Because it wasn't, again, if we can go back to that sort of overarching theme, we talk about home education, it really was about relationships. Yes. That decision, that initial decision to not just sort of start the day and send everyone off to their own thing while I work with whoever is the emerging reader, was actually rooted in a desire to continue to facilitate this family relationship, because your family culture is being formed here. And so when the kids are little, it's you sit on the couch and you read a Curious George, or you read a Margaret Wise Brown picture book. And then all of a sudden you've got a 4th grader and she's reading independently and she's ready to go off and do her own thing. And she's perfectly capable of doing that. But you don't want to lose that closeness. Right. And that all of those relationships that you've nurtured, that family culture that you have nurtured over the years. And so that's actually how it all started. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put these books in this basket and I'm going to read to all of the kids every morning. That way I don't lose touch with the family like we have been doing.
Like,
I'm just going to call it the morning basket. And that's how it started.
And that's how it started. And that really has been just it's, as you said, through the years, and maybe just, share a little bit, if you don't mind, how that has changed, because you said it wasn't always in the morning either. So in the beginning, when you started it, you had all of them at home, right?
Yeah. They're all here and they're growing. And then all of a sudden at one point, your oldest is a fourth grader. And then all of a sudden you blink and your oldest is 17. And capable of reading Winston Churchill, and they don't want to sit there for Little House on the Prairie for the nth time. And so I began to structure Morning Basket a little bit differently. But at this point, I've seen the fruit. I've seen the fruit because I see that my older kids are modeling some of the virtues and habits that I spent time investing in the beginning, and they're modeling it to their younger siblings. And wow, I have discovered that I actually don't have to teach all of those or put nearly the investment of time in, because the younger kids, it's very true what they say, more is caught than taught. So the younger kids are watching this being modeled, and so much is happening. Not only that, the older kids have to learn to respect. They cannot interrupt the 5-year-old when he is giving a very, very, very primitive narration. They must still respect quietly when someone else is talking. So there's so many valuable things in there. But then I started to structure a little bit differently. And so I put just our morning devotions and maybe a piece of poetry on the front end. And I would excuse my senior or all of my high school kids to, if they wanted to, they could go and begin their day because they have a much heavier schedule than the rest of the kids. I would say 50% of the time they stayed, and 50% of the time they would excuse themselves and go and start their reading. But invariably, they would still kind of be listening, because I can remember a book that I was reading aloud, an American history book. And I had finished the Morning Basket. I said, okay, we're going to close it here, and we'll pick up with the next chapter tomorrow. And from upstairs, I hear the senior, "Oh, Mom, finish another chapter." So they're always listening. They're still tuned in. It changed a lot. It changes when there were toddlers in the house. Morning is full of energy for everybody. So there were times, there were seasons and years where Morning Basket happened while all the kids were eating lunch, and I would read aloud because, children who eat are a captive audience. That's number one hack that you learn as a mom. Also, there were times when I might be reading aloud to the kids while little people napped in the afternoon. There was less of a disruption. We could get in a few minutes of Morning Basket, but if I was reading something really meaty maybe, and the kids were enjoying a lot, maybe something from Narnia, I would read that while the little people were napping. So it can happen anytime during the day. The basic idea is simply that you read aloud, that there are some beautiful things, some good, true, and beautiful things that you can do with all ages, from preschool to high school. And you can do them in common, and there is much, much fruit in that. I found over the years that our family devotions fit there very easily. At the beginning of the day, regardless. Beginning of the day, family devotions. Poetry fits in there beautifully. Oh my goodness, again, memories of the charge of the Light Brigade, and I'm standing on top of the coffee table, launching into happily. And the kids love those memories, and the kids would recite those things in there. So poetry fits in there beautifully. Geography is something that always fell to the back of our schedule. And so I thought one year, I'm going to put that in the Morning Basket, just 5 minutes. And you'd be amazed, Mom, what 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 36 weeks of the year, you'd be amazed what you can get done in just 5 minutes. So it doesn't have to be this massive, overthought, overplanned thing. Just grab a book. Nature study fits there beautifully. Civics lessons fit there beautifully. If it's an election year, that's when we would talk about how do we elect people? How do we put a president in office? What does that look like? What about the Electoral College, the branches of the legislature, all these different things we would talk about. And I would just plop them right there in the Morning Basket. And it just seemed to work.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it was never the same year to year, because every year your children's needs and the rhythm of the family was unique.
Yes, every single, and it looks very different now. Most everybody know.
But what was consistent from that is the desire to have everybody together at least at one point of the day, and the ability to start building a storehouse of memories.
Exactly. From something good, true, and beautiful. Always wanted I always wanted that time to reflect this beautiful, very classical idea of the true, the good, and the beautiful. So I tried to pull something very beautiful in. And I tried to pull in things that I often let slip off the back end of our schedule because we were busy or something. Something always happens, right? Something always happens when it comes to art, or whatever it happens to be for your family.
Yes. And you would say, and they're just as vitally, if not, like as you said, we are drawn to beauty. The creator is made our hearts desire that beauty, and it leads us to the other transcendentals. It just really is an incredible experience. As far as your own education and your own spiritual growth, what would you say came out of all of that too? What were some of the fruits?
Well, so the biggest probably was the idea that, I see all of the good with my kids in the morning basket. I need my own morning basket. And so this was several years ago. I don't even know when I first started. I thought, I'm just going to put some books in a basket for me, because I found that my feet hit the ground and I was already going 90 miles an hour. And that would still happen today if I'd let it, even though season of life has changed. That's just the nature of a mom. We live an active vocation and it moves fast. And so I realized that if I did not intentionally begin my day in a certain way, it would begin without me. And so I put Mother's devotional in usually a prayer book. I love divine intimacy. I love the book Mother Love. And so I put very simple devotionals in there. And then a piece of fiction, but almost always a piece of nonfiction, the Saints, biography of the Saints. I just finished Mother Mary of Agrada's Mystical City of God, her 4-book set, which took me a year to finish, because just like in the morning basket for the kids, I don't rush myself and I don't let myself gobble books up. Like that's for my evening reading. If I'm reading a piece of fiction and I just want to read because I'm loving it so much. But in the morning, I want to be really thoughtful. Same idea applies. I want to plant seeds, ideas. I want to engage beauty just a little bit at a time, because if we think of it as a feast of ideas, we can gorge ourselves all we want. But just as our body cannot digest all of that material, and then we end up with indigestion, if I just gorge all of these fantastic ideas first thing in the morning, I will not be able to pick one to turn over in my brain, to plant and nurture in my soul, and to really tend throughout the day an idea, something that I've encountered in my reading that I want to really build up within my prayer life. And so anyway, that's kind of how the Mother's Morning Basket started. It could have a cookbook, it could have Elizabeth Gouge in it, it could have anything you want, but just some reading to nurture your mind in the morning.
So and again, what I hear from that is, less is more, in the sense that it's not tons of stuff. And how often is our day? And you're so right, Jen. It's true. And especially, I suspect you're kind of like me. We're a little achievement, goal-oriented, A-type.
Maybe.
We want to get to some of those things. And so you hit the day with this list in your head of all the things that are set before you. But how do we, that's beautiful. You've now shifted that to the mindset, to the intentionality of your heart is now turned towards something beautiful that you're pondering, that then becomes that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that it does go back to, people are probably thinking, well, that's really great for you, but my kids would not appreciate me reading first thing in the morning. And and of course that's true. All kids want our attention all day, every day, 24 hours a day. But here's where some habit training and some discipline comes in. And if you cannot say to your kids, this is what I would say to my kids. This is my morning basket time. I would set up a chair in my room with my basket next to it. And if I'm sitting in my chair and I'm saying my morning prayers or I'm doing my reading, do not come and interrupt me unless someone is bleeding.
Yeah.
And I mean it.
That's exactly.
And kids would invariably toddle on in there to let me know that they could not find the waffles in the back of the freezer. And it was not being cruel, and I was not trying to shirk my duties because I intended to go in there. Again, it's a short basket, maybe 15 minutes of reading. They were not going to starve in 15 minutes. And I would just say, you're interrupting. You can wait 15 minutes. I will be out there and I will locate the waffles in the freezer for you at that time. And you do that enough, and your kids learn respect. And they learn to value that you have this time in prayer, but they also see that mom stops, that mom is praying, that mom is nurturing her mind as well.
Yeah.
And those are important things to model to the kids.
It is. It's, it's even like getting back to, I can think about even just the advice of, putting your shoes on and getting fully dressed in the morning. It's just, when you're just so tired, and I know that sounds really kind of, as you said, like mean or just, but there's a certain mindset in terms of you're just, I'm not in my pajamas anymore. I'm dressed for the day. Your mindset. So it's the same thing of like getting yourself dressed in the suit of your faith.
Yes.
To face the day, and you're modeling. You're kind of, because come on, our kids are watching us every step of the way, and whether we like it or not, and in good ways and bad ways too. I mean, and when we mess up and lose our patience, and because as you said, you may have not had any sleep, the baby was up all night, and you're just there, or it's not this rigid thing, but it's also sometimes, I will lose it. It's the ability to come back in humility and model that as well for our kids.
Absolutely. And so we could model being on social media all morning until we absolutely have to get up. Or we can model that we have the divine intimacy open to the liturgical year and the prayer of the day, and we're doing that.
I do think kids thrive on routine.
Yes,
we thrive on routine.
Yes,
but there's this part of this free will that says, "Well, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it," and it is about dying to self. And what a beautiful opportunity! Parenting does to that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, it's good. I mean, you and I, we could just sit with a cup of coffee for hours and talk about this. I'm so grateful. What would you, let's wrap this up here in terms of morning baskets. We have a lot of families that are even just not even homeschooling yet, like either they're planning to get married or they have little toddlers, or, what would you suggest for them to even get started in thinking about a homeschool lifestyle?
I guess I would say, if you have discerned that your vocation is to the married life, then it is never too early to begin nurturing that family culture. What will that family culture be? Will it be anchored to social media and looking outward and looking for answers in these tiny little squares and a snippet of someone's life? Or will your family culture be anchored to like a beautiful horarium? And a horarium is just an hourly and order of the day. And every single order, convent, every single one has a horarium, their daily horarium. It's set by their rule. Think of it as St. Benedict's rule of life. It's set by their rule. And we as the domestic church are no different. We should be no different. You should have a horarium. And so whether you are single discerning the married life, whether you are married but you do not have children yet, or you're married and you have very young children, but it is not time to start like a structured homeschool, I would definitely start right there. What is your daily horarium? Know that it is going to change. Mine changes every season. And I don't mean like summer, winter, spring, fall. I mean, as you move through the seasons of life, you move from toddlers to elementary school children, you add another baby, you've just changed your season of life. And so your daily horarium should change and adjust. And as a family, that should be very flexible, very gentle. I like to talk to people about my horarium is always set up in blocks of time, not, at 7:30 a.m. Jen, yes, 7:30 a.m. Jen will tie her shoes. And if she doesn't, she feels like she's failed at the day. No, from 6 to 8 a.m., I have a morning routine. And that happens to include that mother's morning basket that we were talking about and getting dressed for my day and preparing. It consists of movement, some kind of wellness oriented movement, working out, that sort of thing. So think of your time, your day in chunks of time. you don't schedule changing diapers, but you are going to have a chunk of time where you do your morning routine.
Right.
And start brainstorming, prayerfully brainstorming that daily herarium, because it will set the foundation for your family culture.
Yeah, and that's really the heart of it, building culture. And that's why I'm so grateful for everyone that is here joining us in the community, because it isn't social media, it is building culture. We're united by our beautiful faith and trying to build up our families. And so I thank you, Jen, from the bottom of my heart, for you to share with us beautiful wisdom, your experience, and your heart for the Lord. So I at the end of this, we do have links. Please do spend time visiting Jen's website. It's wildflowersandmarbles.com.
Yes.
Yes. And she has incredible, there's some printables, some resources you talk about in other articles about morning baskets. I love your article too on the call within the call of homeschooling, homeschooling 101. So many incredible resources there. And any other places that people can find you? Is that pretty much the place?
You can catch me on Instagram as well. I share tiny little bits, more personal fragments of our life. A lot of the homeschooling is all on my blog at Wildflowers and Marbles, but I will share, like, for example, during planning time, I'm sharing what's going on in the planning season. So you can find like tiny little snippets on Instagram, and I'm at Jen Mackintosh on Instagram.
Okay, at Jen Mackintosh. We will have the links. I believe, we will just continue to have you in the community. I thank you so much for this again. And may God bless you all abundantly. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.